Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on quickly converting classroom training to virtual delivery. We'll get started in just 1 minute. I'm seeing some people asking about audio. Hopefully you can hear me now. If there's any issues, though, please feel free to drop another note in the question panel, and we'll be sure to take care of it. Just some housekeeping issues to start with. We're using GoToWebinar interface. For those that are not familiar with it, one feature that it does not have that are familiar for those of Adobe Connect, it does not have the bi-directional chat. The chat is mostly one way, done through questions. So please feel free to ask any questions that you want using that question panel. Those are sent primarily just to us, the staff here at InfoPro Learning. We will answer those as much as we can. We'll be answering, typing away frantically on the back end, trying to make sure we get to every question. If we don't have a quick answer to the question, or if we're just not able to get to it, we will make sure that we follow up with you after the meeting or after the webinar ends. And we do have your name tagged next to each question, so we'll be able to get you there. One of the biggest questions that we get is this session going to be recorded, and will you give us the link to that? Absolutely, we will. We'll try to make it available. We're going to try our best to get it online by tomorrow morning, but please bear with us here. As you know, there's a lot going on in the interwebs these days, slowing down a lot of different processes for everyone. We'll try to have it tomorrow, but if not, then we'll get it over to Monday. We will not be giving the actual PowerPoint deck, just the recording to that for everyone to share. Again, thanks for joining our session on converting classroom training to virtual training. I'm Nolan Hout, the Vice President of Marketing here at InfoPro Learning. Before we officially begin, I want to thank a great learning partner of ours. For those of you that are familiar with the company trainingindustry.com or Training Industry, with their website being trainingindustry.com, we reached out to them as soon as everything kind of started happening and classes for us started canceling because of COVID-19 and people not being able to travel to deliver classroom sessions anymore. We reached out to Training Industry and said, we want to help. We want to get the word out. Is there anything you can do? And so they have been a great partner of ours, helping push out this message to their channel completely free of charge. I know you've got a lot of places to go when you're getting your content. If you can, go to our site, of course. But if you're not going to go to our site, I recommend you going to trainingindustry.com. They have great content over there, and they're great partners. With that, we'll go ahead and start the webinar session. New, would you mind flipping the slides forward, please?
Could change for you, Nolan?
Can you? No, we're still on the same slide. And one of the things that we'll talk about is there's always technical issues that come up anytime we deliver training. Looks like we've hit our first one, and we're only 2 minutes in. And if it's not working, no, Anu, we're still on. We're good now. Yep. Okay, sorry about that little glitch. So thanks again for joining. A little bit about the company that's putting this on is InfoPro Learning. We're a full-service L&D organization. We've been in this space for over 25 years now, really delivering engaging learning experiences around the world. We offer a full set of services over the 25 years, from end to end, covering things from content development, learning consulting, business solutions, learning technology, talent, and a lot of the services now, which are becoming more and more popular, obviously, are virtual sessions, whether it's coming from hosting virtual sessions or converting ILT sessions to VLT, like we'll be talking about that today. So that's a little bit about us. Let's go ahead and introduce you to our great host today, Anu.
Hi everyone, good morning, good evening, depending on wherever you're joining from. Hi, I'm Manu Gilhotra. I work with InfoPro as Vice President Learning Solutions. I have been in this industry for a very long time, about 18 years now. Started out as an instructional designer, still that is an area that's very, very close to my heart. I'm looking forward to taking you through this presentation today, sharing our great learning experiences through virtual training with you. And please bear with me as we go through this presentation. And if you hear me talking about learning experience a lot in the next 40-45 minutes as we go through the session, this is just an area that's very, very close to all of us at InfoPro. Thank you, Nolan. Thank you for joining us. And, I'm very, very excited to have you by my side. We surely could not have found a better moderator for today. So, all right, let's get started. And let's look at what we covered for today. Anything from you, Nolan, before we start?
No, let's go ahead and kick it off.
Great, thank you. So, and I hope the slide changed this time. So this is primarily what we will cover today. Our topic for today is essentially covering classroom training to virtual. When I say virtual training, I will stick to the virtual synchronous, that is VILT for today. Classroom to blended experiences is for another time. We're doing another webinar on that in a few days. You will soon hear about that. So think of it as ILT to VILT conversion as we go through the slides. Let's start with some good reasons to go virtual, and then we will spend some time discussing what qualifies for good virtual training, and followed by tips and tricks to create or convert to VILT. In fact, the tips and tricks is the place where we will spend majority of our time today. So I hope this session is productive for you, learning how to actually go from ILT to VILT, and you will be able to use your learnings as you close the session. So without further ado, let's quickly look at some benefits of going virtual. Going virtual actually is a great idea, and there are various different reasons for those. In these times, absolutely, this is a topic that all organizations are exploring. But even if we don't think about the current situation, there are still some good statistics to take us towards the virtual direction, and I will talk through some of those as well. But here on this slide, essentially, when we talk about going virtual, it is to do with increased scalability. We're able to handle a much larger participants, in a virtual mode as compared to a classroom, which can only host a few people together. You can also record virtual sessions for a later time. People can just keep the recordings, replay as required, also use them as performance support. Though a word of caution for the number of participants here, if you have a very, very interactive session plan, you still may want to stick to, a slightly manageable number, because, if the idea is to achieve performance outcomes, if the idea is to, not make it a lecture and do a lot of activities, it's more effective that you have a restricted number of participants. Though when you talk about conversion of materials, it's still the same materials that you're going to use as you go by, right? So the effort of material creation may still be the same, but you may want to follow an approach where you have lesser number of participants in the room if there's a lot of interactivity, and just maybe run it as cohorts, smaller groups planned well together. So, and that's from the number of participants. VILTs also help us increase the reach for the learning. There are no location restrictions per se, because, we've very, very effectively converted several classroom programs to virtual and even self-paced, reaching out to over thousands of users across different locations, as compared to classroom sessions where, you may have 2 classroom centers somewhere in Florida, and therefore, a lot of people traveling to those locations, restricted by the travel budgets and, restricted by the time at hand. So definitely a great benefit. of increased reach. And then last but not the least, in fact, a very, very important benefit is also that virtual sessions help you save costs, logistical costs, travel costs, not only of gathering all the learners in a room, but also saving productive participant time. Virtual sessions are shorter, they can be accommodated in regular workday, and therefore a lot of savings. So, so it looks like, there are a lot of good reasons to go virtual. Like I said, not just in these crazy times, but you will also, we are seeing an upward trend in virtual classes otherwise too. So let's look at some data here. This is a report from training industry in 2019. Here, the blue bars here, medium blue, they pretty much represent the virtual ILT, the percentage, significant percentage as compared to the other modalities. And as you see here, this particular bar here, 74%, put together across different industries, there's 74% usage of the ILT.
And Anu, just to chime in here, something that's interesting I haven't seen happen before on GoToWebinar, so it must be the bandwidth of this particular session. I'm seeing that we're upwards of 500 people on now. Might have something to do with it. We're getting probably a very substantial delay, probably 6-7 seconds. When you're flipping your slide. So for those that are seeing that, absolutely, there seems to be a delay depending on your device. On my smartphone, it happens immediately, but on my desktop, it's taking 4 or 5 seconds. So just for your information, Anu.
Thank you, Nolan. So I'll take care of that. I'll go slower as I switch slides, and please do keep bringing it to my attention in case it takes even longer. So I hope everybody is able to see that slide now. So I'll go over this once again. These blue bars is what I was referring to when I was talking about VILT, significant percentage across different industries. And this here, the 74% figure that you see, essentially is the virtual classroom across different industries. So this is consolidated data. So in fact, it does tell us that there is increasing demand and increasing use of virtual training over the face-to-face in-person sessions. And there's also a couple of data points here that tell us about decreasing training spend overall, and therefore the virtual classroom usage going from 10 to 15% in 2019. So totally worth it as long as we can provide good learner experience while hitting the learner goals. So performance is still very, very important and has to stay as a center focal point of the design. And let's see what kind of training is possible through virtual sessions. I will pause a little bit, make sure the slide is updated for all of you. So what qualifies for virtual training? I'm sure this is a pressing question for many of you. And the answer is everything. Yes, everything. So anything and everything is what you can effectively deliver through a virtual training, right from traditional face-to-face programs to workshops, networking events, to communities of practice, which for a very long time, I guess I also had a mind block as a designer that, if you're doing a workshop, it is more interactive and therefore it has to be face-to-face. Or if you're building communities of practice, product user groups, a lot of things happen very effectively in face-to-face. But as we started moving towards doing more virtual training, we figured that there are a lot of different ways in which you can make virtual sessions very effective, sometimes much more effective than in-person trainings also. And it's just the design that matters. You have to be very, very sensitive to how you design those sessions. Exceptions, I would say any hands-on learning, like working with physical machine, learning a heart surgery, which where you can typically teach associated concepts through virtual learning. But for that matter, you can't even teach heart surgery in a room, right? Not even a classroom. So having said that, for simulated experience, a lot of things that are possible these days. There's virtual reality, there's mixed reality, where you can actually work with machines even in a virtual setting. But that's again for another time. practically, anything that's related to the learning programs, workshops, networking events, communities of practice. There is technology available. There are ways to make those things effective in virtual settings. So coming back to virtual ILTs, yes, you can handle everything in virtual setting. Every learner experience needs a good, robust design depending on the delivery mode. So if you're delivering virtually, please design for a virtual delivery, which is where you'll have to look at all the training materials and make sure they all align. And that's all that we are here for. So today, as we go through the rest of the slides, the rest of the sessions, we will look at ways to quickly convert ILT to VILT.
And a really good question, Anu, that we're getting from quite a few people, and I think you'll touch on this later, but want to make sure I bring it up, is a lot of questions on how can I guarantee that quality remains the same if we're shrinking that time, right? If we go from a week-long session and we convert that to a couple days. So I know you plan on talking about that in the upcoming slide, but definitely a lot of questions around that.
Sure. Thank you, Nolan. Thank you for bringing that to my notice. I will try and touch upon that as we move forward. In fact, a lot of it is what we will see on this slide as well. There is, there are two different ways in which we can go from ILT to VILT. I would say ILT to virtual, overall. You can, start your conversion maybe from going from ILT to VILT, and then as you settle, with the VILT scenario, because the conversion from going from ILT to VILT is quicker as compared to going from ILT to blended, you may kind of, want to do it as a phased process. It is, but these two approaches are completely different from each other. What you see here on the left is essentially you see some pre-workshop, some VILT sessions followed by post-workshop activities here. This is essentially a plan that holds good for ILT to VILT conversion. But here, what we have on the right-hand side is essentially a blended learning plan. Starts with, for one program, where it starts with a program kickoff, a small video, moving to an assessment, which is online assessment, about 5 minutes, moving to a few micro-learning, self-paced WBT sessions, and then a cohort interaction through a technology platform, a virtual session, and then post-work is in the form of a business simulation here, a cohort interaction followed by some mentoring coaching. So this plan here on the right is very different from this plan here. This one is quicker, going from ILT to VILT. This one may take some development time, but this is more sustainable, more self-paced. Even the learner experience is varied. It has many different modalities, caters to many different learning styles, helps people, just follow the sessions at their own pace. Very different, but then this takes time. This is more cost effective, in terms of building the experience. So, and this piece is not bad at all. You can meet various different learning objectives in a cost-effective way, depending on the budget, depending on the timelines. I would suggest looking at the purpose. Why are we doing that session? How sustain? For how long are you going to need that particular training? Looking at the budget timelines. You can make that decision whether you want to make a complete switch to a blended learning program or you want to stick to VILT as you talk about virtual. However, even in the, as you go from ILT to VILT, your materials need a complete overhaul. You have to look at each and everything and make sure that, the materials are designed for a virtual delivery. We will look at some of those things that we can quickly do to get from ILT to VILT. And when I say training materials, it's essentially your slide deck, facilitator guide, participant guide, everything needs to be relooked. So does this, I hope this makes sense to you, and the benefits that we learned about so far in terms of scalability, in terms of wider reach, in terms of cost efficiency, and then there is training industry data that supported, our view. Looking at all of that, this particular session we are still focusing on ILT to VILT conversion, just reminding you once again. And now we will see some tips to quickly convert ILT sessions to VILT sessions. So here on this particular slide, what I have here is essentially a sample plan. Tip number 1, to go from ILT to VILT, slice up your sessions, make them shorter. It's very, very, very difficult to hold attention of participants for a very long time in a virtual setting. So while slicing up your sessions gives you the advantage to make them more engaging, hold the attention of the participants, it also helps you save on some productive time, because now after dividing your sessions, you can you don't necessarily need to hold them together in a couple of days. You can space them out over a period of time, in a week, 2 weeks, depending on how long the program is. This, for example, the example that you have here is a 1-day classroom program that we divided up into smaller sessions. There's a 1.5-hour session here, there is a 2-hour session here, there's another 2-hour session here, and there's some pre-work that goes even before the first session, there is post-work that goes along. But when you divide, an important thing to consider is to make sure that you are defining very clear objectives for each of these sessions. Define clear objectives, stick to those objectives, and as far as possible, leave some hooks between there has to be some continuity as you go deliver each of these sessions. To maintain that continuity, there are various different things that you can do. You can add, for example, here in this particular program, we've added some post-work here. So between this and this session, there is a small assignment that learners can do. It may just take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but it keeps learners engaged and also ready for the next session. There's another small assignment here, and as we complete, there is a project here, and then there is post-work assignment.
Anu, a question that's come up by a couple of people is, what is the maximum time that we should consider for a virtual classroom that would be considered efficient? Now, we know it depends, and that's the answer that most people like to give. But can you provide some insight on what you've seen the maximum be that has still been impactful?
Yeah. So if I would talk about the maximum time being impactful, Nolan, I would say, 4 hours, not too bad, But if I have to stick to optimum time, I will say anything between 2 and 3 hours. So a short session, like an hour and long session, typically is like the meeting time, easy to go by. 2 to 3 hours, absolutely effective, as long as you build the right interactivity, right engagement. And max, I would say 6 to 4 hours. Anything longer, I have to cover this session in 1 day, and this will take 5 hours. I would say give it a break, in between, maybe a lunch break. Start at 10, go on till 1, and then give it a lunch break, and then wrap up your session for another, take another an hour after the lunch. So that's primarily what I've seen working in my experience. Yeah. So yes, so very important. Break it up. Have some pre-work, post-work, some hooks in between, some learning materials in between that learners can read through, especially when you are like planning one program to go into, let's say, 4 weeks. 1 session a week, 1 session every 2 weeks. Absolutely maintain that engagement in between the sessions. All right, so going on to tip number 2 here, learner engagement. It's a no-brainer. Everybody talks about it, right? All the time when we talk about a superior learning experience, we talk about learner engagement being critical, regardless of the modality. But here, especially when you go from in-person to a virtual session, it becomes super critical. It becomes super important because you can't see the participants, right? So a few tips here to make that happen. Use stories, use activities. If you have to do a text-heavy lecture, if there's a lot of information to be delivered, there are other ways to do that. You can distribute those materials as PDF documents, as Word documents beforehand. You can, just give reading materials. What is the even need to meet and read through content. So only if you're sharing experiences, only if you're, sharing stories, only if you're doing activities together is when a virtual, session becomes engaging. Second important thing, when you put your slides together, make sure that they're visually appealing. We cannot undermine the importance of good media, clean media on the slides, so that slides are easy to follow. They are not text heavy. Participants do not get lost in the process. Just keep them clean. Keep your slides clean. And in fact, a very, very important thing is the message that you're delivering through those slides. Keep extreme focus on the message, keep it crisp, keep it clean. And many of you who come from instructional design world probably also remember the best practices, having one idea in a paragraph and then one idea on a slide, and then every topic has to be one idea. So stick to the single idea best practice for creating your messaging. Do not mix your ideas on any one slide. Do not mix two different ideas, even in a particular topic. Do not mix two different ideas in the overall session. Stick to the common theme of terminal objectives and then the enabling objectives. It will really, really help you. Last but not the least here, keep an interaction, keep an activity on every few slides. Try to keep engagement every 3 to 4 slides, and that also helps really maintain engagement as you go by. We talked about this before. Leave some hooks for easy knowledge transfer. So wherever you have anything, wherever you have a lot of information for participants to remember, it makes sense to give it out as a handout rather than covering it on a slide or focusing on the lecture piece. So you have some examples here, right? You can see how clean these slides are. There are only a few points, some graphics on the slide. Simple, easy to read, use a lot of white space, and use moderately large, simple fonts so that participants can find it easy to follow. Only a few words per line, only a few lines per slide. Those are the kind of user experience principles that you must use. Moving forward, the next step essentially is on the third point that we saw here, which is essentially to do with activities. Like I said, these are, activities are important. So as you design those activities, it's, you have to look at your in-person activities and then see what is it that you can quickly convert and what is it that needs complete overhaul. For example, anything that is hands-on, you're doing a Lego activity in a classroom, there is no way you can convert it to a virtual ILT. You have to change that activity, right, using the virtual tools. But as much as possible, try to stick to what you have and find quick ways of conversion, because the idea is to still have a product, that works well in a virtual setting in a quick way. As you plan your VILT activities, you have to also look at the time plan for each activity. The same activity that you do in an ILT environment may take longer in a virtual setting. Primarily because, in a classroom, the instructor can just move around in the classroom, go visit participants, see what they're doing, understand a lot from their body language. but all of that is not possible in a virtual setting, right? So even the instructor has to kind of, if you're doing breakout rooms, if you're doing whiteboarding activity, it's more sequential than, watching a lot of participants together. So plan a little longer time in the VILT, do your due diligence, make sure, you watch out for anything that may go longer in a virtual setting. Another very important thing is that you plan your activities based on the features that you have available in the platform. You must have seen today, in this particular platform, we don't have a two-way chat feature. So we didn't really plan for any engagement there. But, most of the tools available for training these days, provide a lot of different features that you can use. There is chat feature, there is polling available, there is whiteboard available, there are breakout rooms that you can use, right? So whichever platform that you're using, and these features also vary from one platform to other. For example, the features that WebEx provides, Adobe Connect provides a little more. And then GoToMeeting has some restrictions, on different sites. So whichever platform you're going to use, please do research that platform, make sure you understand all the features. And I'm sure with any of the features that you have available, you can still create engagement in different ways. So
a couple questions have come in about what those platforms are. Obviously, we're using GoToWebinar, which has a training component as well. What are some of the other platforms you've seen work well?
One platform, Nolan and everyone, is Adobe Connect that we really use a lot. And that, in my experience, I've seen Adobe Connect providing a lot of different features for virtual training. Having said that, like I said, there's also WebEx, there's GoToMeeting webinar. So all of these platforms may vary in a little, in different ways. The features may also be different, but all of these support, virtual training. So do your due diligence, with anything that you're planning to use. Then anything, when you go from ILT to VILT, in person to virtual training, review your materials. Some activities, like I said, direct conversion. For example, there are some, a few examples that you see on the screen. If there's a workbook-based activity, you have to select some terms from a finite list that's available. You can pretty much use poll for that, right? Use those terms, create a poll around that. Let your participants choose from options in the poll. Very easy conversion. Similarly, a self-reflection discussion activity, you can always use chat, have participants submit their responses through chat. One-word responses, maybe use emoticons, emojis in the chat. You can ask your participants to choose the emoji that, applies the best. Role plays, there are always breakout rooms. Participants can, go in breakout rooms, work with each other, come back with their project work. Any paper-based activity, where they have to sketch, draw something, it can always be done on whiteboard. So, and these are some examples that are absolutely one-to-one conversion. In some cases, like I said, anything that's hands-on, anything that requires equipment, machinery, Legos, like I said, you need to think about it and maybe redesign completely. So important activities are really, really important, bring a lot of engagement, but choose them wisely, choose them carefully. And I'll move on to the next screen. Here I have some examples, on a PowerPoint that will give you an idea of the visual look and feel, very important for a virtual setting. Again, these are some more activities, that will give you some ideas. There's chat and share, there is peer-to-peer work, there are fill in the blanks through chat features. You can invite responses to these. All right, so this being a critical piece, there are more. So another important tips here as we move forward. There are, it always helps to have a moderator by your side. I have a very expert moderator here. You may not find an expert person to stand by you, but at the very least, you should have someone who can, monitor the technology in terms of, what's coming on chat, what's coming on, what's coming as a question, somebody to run the polls, somebody to use all the different features that are provided by the platform. So very, very, in a virtual setting, the role of the producer or the moderator becomes really important. And when you design your materials, make sure you're addressing the producer role in addition to the facilitator role. Many of you must have done.
And something just to point out, Anu, and there's a question about it as well. A lot of people, and Anu, there's some feedback on your line. They ask, well, if we're going to add a moderator or a host, doesn't that essentially double your training cost? And it adds to the bottom line for sure. There is an extra expense to it, but traditionally the expense for the moderator and host, these are people that are doing this 8 hours a day. They're not necessarily, subject matter experts in one area or the other. So the cost to add them is actually quite a bit different than what you would think when you're adding your traditional trainer for those that are using outsourced trainers or even the trainers that you're paying in-house. Usually the host moderator can be done fairly simply by one person to manage several different sessions.
Yeah, that's so right. Absolutely. In fact, the bare minimum is handling the technology, as you rightly mentioned, Nolan. But if you have to do a session that's very, very interactive, you may really, want to bring that engagement by having someone who can act as a teaching, aid. Just like how you have instructional aids in schools, where the person is able to really help you train. This is a decision that has to be made depending on what the session is for, what are you trying to achieve, who your audience are. For example, if you're trying to do a workshop with fairly senior people in the organization, it makes perfect sense to have someone by your side who can help you moderate that whole experience very effectively. A lecture, maybe not so much. So it all depends on what the purpose is and what you're trying to achieve in that session. There's no one answer to that question, but the role is important, in various different ways. And therefore, when you design your learning materials, it's important to address both the roles. Many of the participants here, especially the ones who are coming from instructional design background, would have done a lot of facilitator guides. Writing very deep instructions for the facilitator on what to say on each slide, what to do on each slide, how to debrief an activity, how to run an activity, and things like that. And therefore, you do have some level of familiarity there. But like we write detailed notes for the facilitator, for a VILT, it's equally important to write detailed notes for the producer or the moderator, and that's how you can build the expertise that you need in that person also. And just like you do a train the trainer for facilitator, preparing the person for the session that's coming up, it's also important that you prepare the moderator for the session that's coming up, both by familiarizing with the technology and also, orchestrating the experience a little bit in terms of how the handoff will happen for each of the slides, what producer's role would be, how the person can help facilitate it well. So yes, it is 2 people versus 1, but pretty much, adds to the experience overall. In fact, there are a lot of tips and tricks available, for both these roles in terms of measuring learner engagement, making sure there is enough learner engagement on each of the different slides, each of the different activities. For example, even simple things like, poll. How many responses you get for the poll will tell you whether all the participants are engaged enough, right? So you have, let's say, 20 participants joining the session, but only 10 are responding to the poll. There's a clear need, to call others' attention and make sure that you engage them even more in the session. So that's where a moderator becomes really important. Similarly, participants appearing from the chat is another signal that you need to get people back to the session. Various different ways, but make sure that you address, when you create your training materials in your facilitator guide, you add one more column, just like the column that we have here, and go equally deep on the role of the producer as you go for the facilitator. Mention everything that the person can help with on each of the slides. Okay, so moving forward, we have another tip here, and I'm just going slow to make sure that everybody's screen is updated. So tip number 5, set expectations for the participants beforehand. There are 2 critical things in virtual settings that everybody must know about. One is the etiquette, general etiquette to attend a virtual session, things like go on mute if you're not talking, or use different features of the platform well. So if possible, give a handout even before participants come in for the workshop. You may also
I'm sorry, Anu, your audio went quiet.
Is it better? Is it better, Nolan? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a lot better. Thank you.
Thank you. So, so as you're seeing, technology challenges also happen. Sometimes there's network bandwidth or any other challenges can, make the experience go a little bit haywire. So as much as your participants are prepared, as much as your, trainer, as much as the moderator are prepared to handle those challenges, it really helps in delivering a very smooth experience. So prepare your participants, send out a quick email with the, the instructions, or send out a handout in advance. Prepare them with the etiquettes, prepare them with the features of the platform that they can use, how to use the chat feature, how to use the breakout rooms, especially when you're using more complex features like whiteboard or, breakout. Point them to where they will find them on the screen. Point them to, use those features well so that the activities do not slow down and, learners also end up having a good experience. So this is important. And then another thing that you can do to set the right expectations of the participants, and this is also a little bit of a pre-marketing activity, is to really market your virtual class. Create engagement, create interest. Videos, absolutely a great tool for pre-marketing. What I have here is a short video, again, used to create excitement for one of those sessions. It may not be really playing very well for you because it's on a, it's in a synchronous session. So as much as possible, send these videos in advance so that participants can look at it. You're able to market the class. You're able to generate some interest. Case studies, infographics, all of those resources work well too for this purpose. Do not use videos inside the virtual environment like I'm doing here, because the broadcast will be choppy. The experience is not going to be smooth. But set participants' expectations, by using all of these resources. And then the last tip here, as we are approaching the end of this webinar, is facilitate the transfer of learning. Again, many of you who come from instructional design background understand what the term means, transfer of learning, making sure that participants do not forget the learning that they had in the virtual session after they go back to their workplaces. And probably many of you remember, the researches and the data on, how people forget 85% of what they learn in a classroom right after they go back. Same thing is going to happen with virtual sessions also, or probably even more, because, because of the lack of accountability, unless you create that accountability through by doing the right activities and, planning the right engagement. Make sure that you provide them performance support. It really takes the whole experience a long way. give them videos, give them websites, give them articles, activities to do, some examples here, provide them just-in-time access. Any information that they're supposed to remember, make sure we give them, a quick job aid so that they can go back and refer back to it instead of trying to remember all of this in their heads. So very, very important, and my last tip for the day, in fact. And then there's a quick recap. These couple of things that you're seeing here are from the infographic that we created for you guys to take back to your jobs. You will quickly, as we are ending, you will see the link to this. You will be able to download the infographic. Please do remember to take it back with you. In today's session, we started with talking about what virtual training can help us achieve in terms of increasing scalability, increasing reach, wider reach, optimizing costs, and what can be quickly converted from ILT to VILT. We talked about doing, face-to-face to virtual conversion in various different ways. We can do a quick ILT to VILT format conversion, or we can also create a blended learning program depending on the purpose that you're trying to achieve. ILT to VILT conversion is quicker, and therefore we spent some time looking at 5 or 6 different tips to make that conversion very quickly, very easily. Plan for shorter sessions, focus on learner engagement, use a lot of activities, provide detailed instructions to facilitators as well as the producer, set expectations with participants in advance, then give them, etiquettes to follow, give them, generate excitement about the program even before participants come in, and then, provide performance support so that learners can take it back, refer back to the materials as they have more time at their hands. So yes, this is the quick recap of everything that we learned. I'm glad we could all gather up and, I could share my learnings with you. Great experience. Thank you for joining the session. Nolan, over to you.
Thank you, Anu. And thanks everyone for joining. We have a good list of questions here, Anu, that we'll send back to you. So everyone looking for a couple more answers, go ahead and hold on. I've got those marked here, and we'll get to those. Hopefully everybody was able to get the handout infographic. We attached it to the handout section of this. Don't worry if you're facing issues. That will be available in the email that we send out along with the recording. So you should be able to have that. In addition, some other resources that we have. We'll send the webinar recording within 48 hours. The infographic is available. I'm going to put in the chat the next webinar in our series. A lot of people are interested in converting classroom training to a completely e-learning session. So we're hosting a webinar on that here, and it's in about a month's time or so. If you have interest in that, I just made the link available in the chat session. Please click on that, and you can go and register, and you'll automatically get to that one as well. In addition to the resources that we have, some of the services that we provide to people is the first, which is probably our most popular today, is people wanting some help and assistance of converting an ILT session to a VILT session. Absolutely that. And then the second point, classroom to blended learning program. Doing those conversions has been a service of ours recently that has come in very high demand. We have tried to skill and staff up as much as we can to respond. So please, if you have any issues, let us know. We're happy to, or any projects, we're happy to work with you on those. Also, we talked a lot about a host in this session and the job of a host. Aside from hosting this particular session, there's a lot of work that goes in the background of administrating these, sending invites out to people like yourself, making sure that everybody can join, they can log in. That's a service that we provide to people as well. So if you don't have somebody in-house that does that, let us know. We're happy to take on that job for you. And of course, we have a learning management system, a great way to push out content and information internally. We have a learning management system that was built in-house. We are offering that free for 3 months for those of you that might not have a platform and are looking for a way to still track training, you can go to our website and search for Learning Management System, and you can find that there. And of course, last but not least, we have Learning Strategy. So if you're have a lot more questions than what we were able to get to in this webinar, I'm happy to spend 30 minutes with you, happy to spend an hour with you, and just talk you through what this means for you. With that, now that I've hopefully not been too painful in self-promotion, we'll turn it back over to questions. Let me start with some I've marked. There's some quick ones here for you, Anu, and then there's some that will probably take a little bit. Apologize, I'm having a issue getting to that. So one quick one, we're trying to convert a 4-day session. How does that change the calculus for the length of a daily session? So if you have something that's kind of a week-long 4-day session, what would that look like in a virtual environment?
I would think, Nolan, and everyone, especially when you are planning to convert programs that run into multiple days, think about the experience overall. You can do, if the idea is to do a very quick conversion, sure, just break it up and you do smaller sessions around, a small session per day and then spread out the experience. However, a good way to handle longer programs essentially is to look at opportunities to make it more sustainable. And when I say sustainable, basically anything that's lecture, anything that learners just need to, is like a reading material that they can go through on their own. You have to do a very deep due diligence of what is it that they can do on their own, what is it that they can distribute as materials. And then essentially flip the classroom, So anything that's, use your classroom face-to-face, not face-to-face, but synchronous, use your synchronous classroom sessions, which could just be virtual, only for activities that are important, Q&A, debriefing, really role-playing, practice, coaching. So use synchronous sessions for, all of that and keep lecture out of it. Those are quick opportunities to reduce the duration, reduce the overall session, but then plan for some engagement in between so that, you can keep the learners excited. So, so I would say approach it like a complete overhaul,
Thanks, Anu, and maybe a similar answer to complete overhaul, not sure. A lot of questions around, this sounds great for soft skill training, but what do we do if it's something more technical? In particular, there were a couple of questions on, what do you do when you're doing software product training? How do you do that virtually? How do you manage software product training in this type of environment?
Yeah, so in fact, I would think, Nolan, that software product is easy because you can do a lot of demo sharing. The instructor, just like how you take learners through the software in a classroom, it's even easier to do it in a virtual setting, right? Because you can just be on the product and give a walkthrough of all the different tasks. What is challenging is essentially watching over what the participants are doing, so which is where we use strategies like, make the participants do each of those procedures and then report back to you if they're facing any problems. There can be two-way screen sharing to see if procedure is going right or wrong. One can also do, the moment you think about other modalities apart from the ILT, there's no limit to what can be achieved. There are simulations, there are labs that can be done in different ways, completely simulating the environment. Even EPS is a good option, which is essentially a layer that you put on the top of the platform to provide help to learners in the real time. They can just click on walkthroughs and they can see how it will work in real time on the system. So various different options. But virtual, even in a VILT environment, it's not difficult to handle software training at all.
Thank you. Another question that came up, and I actually answered it the wrong one, but can you talk about the differences between being a supervisor versus a coach?
That's a great question. That's a great question. A little bit outside the purview of this particular topic, but especially when we do, when we design the entire experience for a particular training program, it is, the role of supervisor is very, becomes very important when you're thinking about that experience in terms of the overall cycle time of learning. As a company, we do not believe that any training can be, is only about one single training event. It is, it's the overall journey that matters. And when you look at any topic as a training journey, the role of supervisor becomes even more critical as a coach. So depending on the topic, there are various things that you can do to make sure that the supervisors are involved in the process. Many a times you may also have to coach supervisors on coaching others, right? Because not everybody is, by default has the right coaching skills. So those are the opportunities that you need to look at. But the role of supervisor in coaching learners cannot be undermined. We can definitely use it to the advantage. There are a lot of different resources that you can support the supervisor with. There is further training that you can support them with. The idea is to set expectations in terms of the overall program, make sure the supervisors know exactly what the learners are going to go through in the program, and find opportunities for them to create their one-to-one action plans with the supervisor so that the learning can be carried forward at the workplace.
Thanks. And then I had a question on the difference between the roles between the facilitator and the presenter. Is the facilitator leading the training and the moderator assisting the facilitator, or the other way around? I can answer this one. So the facilitator's job essentially is just to support the presenter. They help with answering questions, managing polls, giving out, dropping files into the handout session, running any Q&A sessions, any whiteboarding, versus the presenter themselves is the person who in most cases is creating the content, running the content, and actually conducting and managing a lot of that session. Next one here we have recommendations for sites to create infographics and short videos.
Super awesome. In fact, a great question. So there are a couple of tools top of my mind that you can use to create videos. In fact, there are a lot of DIY tools. If you search for DIY, you will see many different search results come up. But a couple of them top of my mind, one definitely is GoAnimate, which is very simple to use. It has its own library of various different media elements that you can pull together, quickly add some audio and you're good to go. There's also something called Vyond. I hear is a good tool. Yeah, so a couple of them. Those are the couple of tools that I can think about, and then GoToMeeting, Vyond.
Yeah, I've also used Piktochart. It's at PIKTO chart.com. I'll find the link and set that in there. Something that I've used quite a bit. Really, really simple for creating infographics. If you're not artistically inclined, it's a great way to get some things done.
Yeah, and somebody asked a question about system training earlier, Nolan. So anything that's software training, quick videos can be very quickly captured using Captivate. So that's also another simple tool that can help you achieve quick output.
Wonderful, thank you. Let's add, we're coming up to the top of the hour. We have a couple more we didn't get to, so we'll go ahead and stay on a little bit longer and answer some of them. Let me find some of these that have been, we've answered a lot of these, which is great. This is an interesting one. How much time should you spend creating a virtual training session? Now, I know that question is hard to answer because our first answer is it's going to be it depends. But maybe you can just talk about kind of the differences between creating something in ILT and then maybe talk about what it would be to create it brand new in virtual, and then possibly the differences between creating something brand new from virtual versus just converting that. So if maybe you can touch on those points, it would be helpful.
Absolutely, Nolan. In fact, another great question, because I hear it day-to-day basis, from our clients, from our internal teams. Like you said, the answer is all depends. Having said that, there are some quick rules. So, whatever we saw in this presentation today essentially were some quick tips that we gathered that can help you achieve, help you get to a virtual session quickly enough, and when I say quickly enough, basically a minimum viable product, as we can call it. Something that you can run in a virtual session, all you have to do is, if you have an ILT ready, you look at that ILT, you do your due diligence of, if there is any content that needs to be removed, any screens that need to be lightened with respect to, media, etc. Basically just, making shorter session out of that, doing an evaluation on the activities to see what still applies in a virtual setting, what needs to be changed. If you do only this much, you can quickly get a minimal viable product ready. Only 3 or 4 things, quick things, activities, slicing up the whole session, looking at opportunity to reduce content, looking at the media to see if it can effectively support a virtual environment. These 4 things can give you a quick, minimal, viable product. After that, everything else is opportunity to improve the learner experience, which is where you can do your due diligence of, really adding to the experience, adding more interaction, adding more engagement, creating some hooks, creating some performance support, pre-session, post-session, all of that can be opportunity for future. So approach it like a phased process, that will help you do something while the future state is getting ready. Hope that makes sense, Nolan?
Yeah, I think so. And so there's one that has been asked in a couple different ways. We touched on it earlier, but I think it'd be important to touch on it. And it's a good question, I think, to end the session on. So again, for any questions we didn't get to, we'll try our absolute best to go through and answer those if we didn't cover on it already. But there's a question on, if we have a classroom session that's 8 hours, whatever it is, it's understood that we're going to have to slice that down because we can't put somebody in front of a computer for 8 hours and say, have fun. How can we assure that that same quality of content exists in this virtual world versus this classroom? How do we address that issue?
So when you say, I'm not sure if I understand that question, the same quality of content, the content remains the same, right? What we are essentially focusing on is the quality of experience. Are the learners still so engaged? Can they still achieve the, objectives that are associated with that particular topic? Absolutely, that's where the design comes into play. That's where we have to do our due diligence of how can we effectively deliver on those objectives by, in a different mode of delivery. So,
I think that answered it. And I do think it was, and just from my experience as well, in doing some of these sessions in person versus remote, it's really not about the quality of content that you need to focus on. And Anu, I'm getting some background noise from you. It's not the quality of content, it's really the quality of the outcome and what you're wanting to achieve with that outcome. That's why Anu mentioned earlier that, if you have a 5-day session, might not be a good idea to try to just simply convert that to a virtual training. You need to completely relook at that training program and understand, what am I trying to accomplish in these 5 days? And then find a new way to deliver on that. It more than likely might not just be VILT. It might consist of e-learning and something else. So I think the point really to that question is, yes, we're shrinking the time, but the most important thing is to not focus on the content, but focus on the outcomes that you're trying to measure, and then design your curriculum around that, not necessarily just the duration. And with that, I promised that would be the last question. So Anu, I won't go back on that. Thank you so much, Anu, for facilitating that. Thank you, everybody, for attending. We really appreciate it. We hope you sign up and come to our next webinar as well. If anybody wants to get in touch with us, we'll again be dropping an email with all of the information that we talked about today, but you can always reach us as well. I'll go ahead and type in an email address if you have any questions or follow-up. Feel free to shoot us an email at info@infoprolearning.com. Thank you again. I appreciate your time, and we hope to talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.